So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge.
Always two there are.
Good. Twice the pride, double the fall.
You are the chosen one!
That's right, in the words of Deion Sanders, play my darn theme music. It's Roll On Gaming. Welcome back. Thank you for joining the show. My name is Kevin, and joining me, as always, is my brother Corwin. Corwin, I command you to tell the people how you're doing today.
Oh, yes, indeed. And I'll be very green about
it. It is time. It is the month of command. It is the month of green. No, it's not Christmas time. It's not springtime. It is command month here in the Star Wars Unlimited universe. And I got to tell you, I've finally identified my first problem with Star Wars Unlimited. Would you like to hear what it is?
I would love to hear this, Kevin.
My problem with Star Wars Unlimited is that every time they release a leader or a card in a new aspect, all of a sudden, all I want to play is that aspect. It happened with Boba Fett, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It happened with Director Krennic. It just made me want to try out stuff with Vigilance. And now it has happened again with Command. We're going to get all the way into it, and we're going to discuss some of the things that make Command so exciting to conceptualize and play. But Corwin, I want to gauge the scale here, because the last time we talked, you were at an 8. Are we still floating around an 8? Are we at an 8.5 yet? Have we waned a little bit after the starter stream? Where are we at, man?
Is this going to be like a weekly measurement or litmus test?
Yeah, it's like when you stand up against the door frame when you're a kid, and they just mark with the pencil to see where you're at. This is going to be you every time.
Okay. Well, going back to your comments, I mean, I don't see this as a problem. New leaders and new ways to play, just that's just hype to me. So, yeah, I'm probably still hovering around an 8, but slowly growing. I would say it's a slow and steady growth that's taking place, and certainly some of the cards and units that we saw here over the last week or so have been pretty interesting, Kevin.
Yeah, pretty interesting. We're definitely going to get to them right now, because that's what we're here to talk about. We're gonna dive in a little bit at some of these command cards, and then we're gonna do a little bit more in depth. But let's start with Grand Moff Tarkin, the card that kicked off Command Month. When
Yes.
this was a leader that was released from the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars Unlimited Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now. And this is a really exciting one for me, because Grand Moff Tarkin is a command villainy leader whose epic action only takes 5 resources, has an action attached to the leader side, which says you pay 1 resource and exhaust it, and you give an experience token to an Imperial unit. And then when you take the epic action and flip it, you're getting a 2/7 for your efforts. And every time that Tarkin attacks, you're giving another experience token to another Imperial unit. I mean, let's take this all in for a second. How do you see this in terms of power level when it comes to being able to dole out experience tokens for either 1 or 0?
Yeah, the 0 is definitely strong. The 1 feels about right. And so, we've kind of seen what 1 cost abilities do with Luke and Vader. So we're kind of seeing that, +1/+1 token is roughly equivalent to 1 damage, or 1 shield, which is an interesting comparison to me as we think more about the game and its mechanics. But definitely his ability when he comes into play as a unit is nice, especially because he's got the 7 HP. That's going to really help him absorb a couple of hits, and maybe you'll get off 2 or 3 attacks before he is defeated, and that is going to be significant value, being able to add those experience tokens for basically no cost except for an action. That's really good.
Yeah, I think when it comes to paying the resources, I think in all aspects, you want, let's say, the shield from Luke, because I think Luke's shield does more than probably Vader's ping does, unless you're talking about removing the shield with the ping, which is a very valuable and probably the best use of Vader's ability. And then, I think it's probably a little bit better than the experience token, as you mentioned. So once you're getting it for free, it's definitely better. That being said, Luke's shield, because it's stronger, a little bit more conditional, It can only be a heroism unit on the round you play it. So that's useful to sort of balance that power level a little bit. And honestly, like they spoke about this a little bit in the command live stream, the aspect preview that Fantasy Flight Games did, where command is going to be, especially in villainy, where you want to go tall, where you want to build up the units that you have on the board to be bigger and beefier and stronger and hit harder. And that's how you're going to achieve victory in command and villainy. And this really is a great way to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. And it's a good point about the conditions on Luke's action versus Tarkin's, because it's nice that you don't have to have played a certain card that round to trigger it. I think we've started to see with the discussion of command this week just how the aim is really to create these big monstrous units that are just wreaking havoc all over the board. And as you build those up with Tarkin, I mean, you build, it gets taken down, then you build some more. And so I think it definitely fits the theme for sure. And the more of these you can get off without having to pay for it, the better off you're going to be, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And look, this is something that could work on any Imperial unit. I was just sort of consulting my notes as to where the villainy units stack up with Grand Moff Tarkin, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But this is even something that you can put on your super laser technician right before you're about to swing into something on your opponent's side and get just that much extra value. Whereas before, you might not be taking out a unit, but you're just doing it to get the ready resource on your side. Now maybe instead with that extra +1/+1, you're taking out a unit. You're taking out a fleet lieutenant instead of a Leia, or another snow trooper lieutenant, and you're taking instead of that, you're taking out a cell block guard. So these are things. It gives you the flexibility to be able to buff your units in a way that works in your favor. Okay, we love Tarkin. Tarkin's great. As I mentioned, we're going to get a little bit more into Tarkin and Leia in a bit, but there were some cards that were revealed on the command stream that we need to talk about first, because they paint the bigger picture of what command is looking like. And the first one of those is Prepare for Takeoff. Now, this one probably getting a little bit more slept on in comparison with the other three, just because it doesn't have quite the power level as the other cards that we saw. But still, I think a really solid card. This is a 2-cost, single aspect command event. It's a plan, and then it's an uncommon. And you search the top 8 cards of your deck for up to 2 vehicle units, reveal them, and draw them. And then you put the other cards at the bottom of your deck in a random order. Now, those can be space vehicle units. Those can be ground vehicle units. But either way, I think this card has a lot of flexibility for the 2 costs. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not a bad card. I think the top 8 cards, there's probably a pretty decent chance you're going to find a couple vehicles in there, especially if you've built your deck kind of around this. I think if you're including this card in your deck, there's definitely going to be some lean towards a more vehicle heavy kind of spread with your units. And so I foresee you being able to draw 2 cards with this card pretty consistently. And that's decent value for 2 costs. And then if there's something that comes out, whether it's in this set or in future sets, that you absolutely have to have from a vehicle standpoint, it's really going to make a big difference to have the extra card in there to help you find it. So definitely think it's a solid card and worth the 2 resources.
I like the fact that it serves both sides of the command coin as we understand it so far, right? So I mentioned that the notion of Tarkin and what command villainy is trying to do was to go tall. They also said, and we sort of suspected this when we saw the Leia leader revealed, that heroism command is more designed to go wide, and that's sort of what you want with Leia, to be able to utilize her abilities to attack with multiple rebels at the same time. This serves both sides of that in the sense where if you play this early, you can look to flood the board with more units, more vehicle units, whether that's snow speeders, whether that's Alliance X-Wings, wing leaders. You can even grab Ozatuk gunships from this, even though they're not rebels. And that could give you, the ambush that you need to remove a unit from the space arena that's just sort of sitting there untouched, right? So it's really good in the early game for that. Where it excels in the late game is if you have all of these resources you've built up as a result of command being able to do that, and now you need to go find your Blizzard AT-ATs. You need to go find your Relentless. You need to go find your ATSTs. I think, again, both sides of the game, early and late, this is going to provide some value for you as long as you have enough vehicle units in your deck to make sure it's worth it if you draw it.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's got utility across the board as far as, different stages of the game. I don't even mind it as like a first action either, unless
Absolutely.
unless you're facing like a highly aggressive deck that might take you out in 4 turns. This is definitely a card you could get away with, taking a turn to set up essentially and plan out your strategy. So I don't mind it for that either. I think, it's got a lot of uses. And so I think, decks that want it are going to be able to get to their options more reliably. And that's always a good thing in card games.
Well, the other thing you could do with it if you're using it early is those vehicle units that you just drew into your hand can become fodder for resources if you've really got stuff that you need to be doing to catch back up to an aggressive player. So a lot of uses here. And then we move on to the other event card that was released. This is the counterpart to Vigilance, which was the double aspect Vigilance card we saw in the blue stream. This is command in the green stream. 2 command icons, and for 4 cost, it's a legendary event, by the way. You get to choose 2 in any order of these options. You get to give 2 experience tokens to a unit. Where have we heard that before? A friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to a non-unique enemy unit. Sort of like overwhelming barrage on a stick here, with the sort of added caveat that you can't do it to leaders. Probably a good thing. You can put this event into play as a resource. Where have we heard that before? Resupply. And you can return a unit from your discard pile to your hand. So a lot of really cool options here. Right off the rip, I think this is a better card than Vigilance. Just because I think it gives you a lot more useful stuff to do and makes that for a much harder decision point. What do you think?
I think I would agree with that. I think it's going to be interesting to see how these like named cards for the aspects are going to fit in because of the fact that they have the 2 icons and how much that will potentially limit you as far as deck building, or maybe it won't. But I'll be watching that pretty closely. But I do agree that this card appears to give you options that are more desirable than what you might get with Vigilance. Especially because, thinking back to Vigilance, that there's one of them in there that's discard 6 off the top, right? Which, maybe that's going to be stronger later, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be super effective right away. So, yeah, command here seems to kind of do a lot more that you want it to, and because you can kind of stack your choices, that's going to make for some pretty interesting combos too, like giving the 2 experience and then dealing the damage. Seems pretty good, right? So
Yeah.
I definitely think it's a good card for 4, and probably is going to be worth the two icons, but I definitely think that it's a solid option for you to put in and have it do a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's the trick, right? It's like, is this card by itself worthwhile to include at double command in your deck building? I'm sure there's going to be other cards either in this set or down the road that have double aspect command and double aspect everything, right? Or is it good enough to pay 6 for? 6 feels tough for this to try to fit it in out of aspect. I don't necessarily know that I want to do that. I definitely don't want to do that with Vigilance, although I will say we haven't seen anything that fits the mill archetype that would pair potentially with Vigilance, where maybe something deals damage when a card is discarded off the top of your deck or whatever the case may be. So it might be a little bit too early to judge Vigilance's power level. I don't necessarily think it's too early to judge Command's power level. But again, it will make for some tough decisions if there are other cards like this that provide you with the really strong options. Because I think based on what Command's trying to do, you're going to want that third aspect to complement either the building up of units or the spreading out of units in your deck. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but I do think this presents a much tougher decision than Vigilance did. And so the point is well taken.
Yeah, and again, plenty of value to be had here, and with proper sequencing, this card feels like it's going to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
So definitely a fan, and we'll be again watching closely kind of how it's used and what the leanings are for folks who are trying to fit it in, and just kind of take it from there. But on the surface, it definitely seems like a good card.
Yeah, agreed. And as a legendary, it does feel like it hits that power level. So I mentioned going wide, and this is a card that coming up where it does lean towards wanting you to go wide, and that of course is Admiral Ackbar, one of your favorite characters in all of Star Wars,
Very much so.
which we love to see. This is a 3-cost ground unit, double aspect. It's got command and heroism. For that 3 cost, you're getting a 1/4 rebel official. That has Restore 1. And when played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. Now, important point there, the target unit that you're dealing the damage to, that's the arena that you select for the damage to be dealt. So that's good to know there. This is a rare card, so it's definitely got some power level here again for 3. You have the chance to deal a significant amount of damage, with Admiral Ackbar, depending on how many units you can churn out, how wide you can go. I think this card has a decent chance of being pretty solid in the ability to just deal damage as soon as it hits the table.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree. I find the Ackbar unit card here to be pretty much average. I like its 3 cost. I think it's pretty flexible at 3, but only having 1 attack might be an issue because he just really isn't a threat after he hits the table. Like his 1 plate effect can potentially be very strong, but then he's just kind of sitting there with his 1 attack. Yes, he restores 1, which could be useful, but unless you're beefing him up with other rebel effects like in a Leia deck or something, he's not going to be super threatening. And then even his 1 plate trigger might be kind of an issue to sequence because it's going to rely, I think you're going to mostly use it in ground because in space, you might, Rebels and Imperials both, I think, have some cheap ships, but, Rebels are going to want to play their X-Wings and their Arc 170s. And, if no one's in the space arena, then this ability doesn't do anything. So I think, you just have to be kind of careful with when and how you use it. And so I think it's, again, I think it's a really, really cool to see Ackbar in the game for sure. But I'm tempering my expectations for this one because I think it's just it's gonna hit very hard when it does hit, but I don't know that that's always gonna be super consistent.
Well, so here's a stipulation for you. Let's say this Ackbar wasn't a Restore 1. Let's say this Ackbar was a Restore 2. Would you feel better about it?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Well, how about
I think that would be.
How about we take Ackbar and then we give him Restore 2 by dropping Home 1 onto the field? How about we do that?
Well, I think both of us feel like Home 1 is a home run, Kevin.
Wow. I'm the one that does the puns here, man. This is what are we doing here? What's going on? Is this Bizarro world? What's happening? All right. So let's talk about Home 1 here for a second before we get way off the rails with Corwin making jokes. Nobody wants that. So this is another legendary. So 2 legendaries on the stream. Count them 2. 8 cost for a space unit, command heroism. For that 8 cost, you're getting a 7/7 rebel vehicle capital ship with incredible artwork. Art is phenomenal here.
Super good art. Yeah, really cool.
Fantastic artwork. Home 1 has Restore 2. It gives each other friendly unit Restore 1. So if you add that to Ackbar's Restore 1, which you can do because it has a number at the end of the keyword, then Ackbar has Restore 2 now. And when played, you may play a heroism unit from your discard pile, and it costs 3 less. What did Ackbar cost? That's right, 3. So you can bring Ackbar out of your discard pile for free when Home 1 hits the field. He deals the damage and then has Restore 2 at his disposal, along with all your other units having Restore 1 and Home 1 having Restore 2. Let's just look at Home 1 by itself in a vacuum. Card is amazing.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this is easily the best card we've seen that's 8 cost or higher. in my view.
Wow.
It's packing a lot of punch for its cost, and one of the things that I love the most about it is that it's not like if you drop this and then it gets waylaid or something, it's not gonna like feel as terrible as it might otherwise because of the fact that you're getting a free unit out of it. And I'm saying you're getting a free unit because I think most of the time it will be a free unit. If you're playing this for 8, you're probably not going to have excess resources to bring out something that costs 4 or 5. Maybe you do. I don't necessarily see the game getting to that point very often. So I'm looking at this as basically a free 3-cost unit, which I think is extremely strong. So, and it's got the rebel and the vehicle keywords. So that's going to go with some of your other cards that we've already seen. I think this is a fantastic card.
So you said something interesting there. You said this is the best 8-cost card that we've seen. So
Yes.
8 costs or higher, I would assume you meant there, because I think you are suggesting that this card's better than Relentless.
Better than Relentless, better than Palpatine, better than Blizzard AT-AT. I think it's, better than all of those.
So I think I take issue with Palpatine, with it being better than Palpatine, because Palpatine immediately spreads out the damage, and he provides 4 different traits, which are incredible. You know, and I think, again, that's another one where if you get Palpatine waylaid, then you're just coming back out and doing 6 damage again. Now,
very much true.
It's the difference of a 6/6 versus a 7/7. It's the difference of not having restore and not getting the extra body. So I get that aspect of it, but I definitely think they're a little bit more on par. Whereas I think I would agree with you in the sense that the other 2 big bads in Command, being Relentless and the Blizzard AT-AT, I think Home One's better, and it should be better. It's a legendary, right? So there's gonna be a power level there that we may not necessarily find in some of these other cards, because it's gonna be hard to get and hard to get on the table. And yeah, I have no problem with this being a powerful card. I just think that you get a decent bang for your buck with Palpatine as well.
I'm not disputing that, and I think I'm not trying to take away from the power level of Palpatine. I just think if I'm paying 8, I want this card.
Yeah,
that's where my preference lies, and it's not just because I'm a hero homer. Like I just really feel like this ship is giving you a ton of extra utility for its cost. Mm-hmm. And I think both of them are very good options. But when I saw this card at first, I was like, holy smokes, this is such a high return for what you're paying.
Yep.
And that's what I'm looking for. Like, I want cards that pack a lot of value, and this is definitely one of them.
You're definitely getting what you pay for here. And that's not always the case with some of the higher cost stuff. I think, the ATSD comes to mind off the rip. But I think this card's fantastic. So that was pretty much it from the Command live stream that they did, the Aspect preview stream that they did. In terms of spoilers, now they did hint at some stuff that I want to discuss here a little bit, because Tyler was forthcoming was the wrong word, because he wasn't allowed to be forthcoming, but he was very generous in his little hints that he was dropping, which I appreciated. So a couple things that he said that I keyed on a little bit, that I want to talk about with you here are, the first thing is he expects super laser tech and resupply to be, quote, major factors in the competitive metagame. Do you agree with that first instinct?
I think that's the general consensus among the community at this point, don't you? I feel like we all kind of feel the same way.
I think so. Here's my counterpoint to that. I think that is true about Super Laser Technician. No question, hands down, easy peasy, no argument. You got it, right? Resupply is a little bit of a trickier one, at least with the card pool that we have now, because I think it's very situational. It's situational in a way that if you don't have it towards the middle, like towards the 3rd or 4th round, when you're trying to, when you can afford getting out both a unit and potentially ramping up to your leader 1 round quicker, do you really want this card? Like, is this something you're ever going to want to pay for? Or when you draw it in the late game, when you have 7-8 resources, is this just an instant resource drop? You're good to go. Get it out of my hand. You know what I mean?
Which is not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing if you're in green and trying to pay for these 8 and 9 cost options.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see that being a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But now that we've seen, like, going back to command, if you use command as a resource, I mean, you could potentially resupply, and this is a lot of resources you're paying without putting units on the board. But theoretically, you could resupply turn 2, command turn 3, and all of a sudden, after resourcing twice, you're up to what? What does that make you at? 7 by like turn 4?
So turn 3, if you play resupply, then you're at 4. Then you put one down for 5. You play command, you're at 6, and then the following you put one down, you're at 7 by turn.
By turn 4.
Yeah.
I mean that's some serious ramp.
that's 2 turns. That's 2 turns before Luke that you're getting Vader out, essentially.
Yep.
And 1 turn before, I think, everything else we've seen, right? Because Boba, Leia, Krennic, Tarkin are all 5s. Is that do I have
right?
that
So
math right?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And so and then Boba is also readying resources, isn't he? So like the extra kind of oomph you get from his abilities, or Tarkin hitting the field before the opponent is able to build up units that are big enough to take him down quickly. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I think that it's pretty well accepted at this point that those 2 cards will be staples in green and perhaps in the larger meta, but the card pool, as it reveals itself more and more, will support that hypothesis, I think.
I think I'm still holding out for resupply to prove me wrong, and maybe it does. But Super Laser Technician is fantastic, and I am going to include 3 in every command deck that I build, unless it's a heroism deck. So I love that. We were also sort of teased with the fact that green is where you find, loyal troops, you find politicians, you find officials, and you find emperors, which was sort of snuck in there. So I don't know if that necessarily means that's a Palpatine leader in command, or if it's another emperor that we're not thinking of, or maybe it's a second Palpatine unit that we don't know about, or a clone of I'm not going to get into all that, but so that was thrown out there, which I thought was cool. And then the other thing that was teased was a unit that helped give units ambush, and said that was an Admiral. So I don't know what Admiral that could be. Could it be a hero Admiral? Could it be a villain Admiral? I'm trying to think of a hero Admiral that it could be, and the only one I can think of is, at some point, I think Crix Madine was an Admiral, but I don't remember.
Oh, that's out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm
at least for set 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got Dodonna, right? It's not.
Dodonna was in the originals, wasn't he?
I don't know if we saw Dodonna until, I don't know when we saw Dodonna. I think we saw Dodonna in Empire Strikes Back. So
sounds right.
Madine, I think we also saw in Empire Strikes Back, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well,
I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, yes, some interesting stuff there for sure. Yeah. Green feels like it's going to be doing all sorts of cool things, though, doesn't it? I mean, yes. There's a bunch of. I mean, I think Command and Cunning both, we're kind of seeing that these are aspects that are going to bring some very unique tricks and combos and plays to the table, and that has me pretty excited to try them out.
Well, let's talk about aspects and how they work together, because I want to get tribal a little bit. Okay, Corwin, I want to just take everything aside except for 2 leaders that we have now seen that are both command leaders. So there's a relevance here. And they both deal with tribal mechanics exclusively. Luke is not tribal. He affects heroism units. Vader is the same way. He affects villainy units. But what Leia and Tarkin do is they specifically affect the traits of Rebel and Imperial. So I want to take first a look at Leia, because I think Leia as a leader just got a lot better this week. And I'm not ashamed to say that I think, this new look for Leia is super awesome, and something that I'm somewhat interested in testing. But how many Rebel units does Leia have at her disposal right now? Okay, and that number right now is 15. Okay, so of those 15 units, you've got 3 vigilance, 2 command, 2 cunning, and 8 heroism. No aggression yet. We should be seeing that next month in the aggression aspect preview, which is very exciting. But with Leia, you've got the 2 ground and 1 space in vigilance, 1 ground and 1 space in command, 2 ground in cunning, 6 ground and 2 space in just heroism. And again, this supports the idea that Leia wants to go wide, right? Because of those 15 units, only 3 of them cost 5 or more. And can you name those, by the way? Can you just name off the rip the 3 that cost 5 or more?
Oh boy,
We just
probably
saw one.
not. But yeah, home one
That's
is
one.
one of them, right?
Yep,
The snow speeder costs 5.
that's correct.
And I don't think I can come up with a third one without leaving our audience
So
waiting for.
the third one is Vigilant Honor Guards, which was
Oh, that's a 5 cost also.
that
right?
is a 5 cost. That's the one that was spoiled by Strictly Casual, I believe.
Got it.
So those are the only. That's just a third of the not a third, a fifth of the units that we've seen so far. Cost 5 or more. Then only 2 of those 15 cost 4. And that, of course, is Dodonna and the Consular Security Force. So 10 out of 15 Rebel units right now are cost 3 or less, which means you can get them out on turn 2 or earlier. And I think that that's super key for Leia to be able to make sure that she's using the most out of her action and out of her leader unit ability, and being able to spread you out and attack with tempo and do all that stuff. So I think when we're looking at this Leia and we're looking at what this Leia is trying to do, based on the cards we've seen, what aspect do you think fits best with Leia as it stands right now?
Well, I mean, we're talking about besides command and heroism, right? Because that's what's on our leader card. So we're talking about potentially a third resource.
If we're not playing command in the Leia deck, and we're not doubling up on command, where do we land in terms of villainy, vigilance, cunning, aggression, heroism?
Yeah, it's kind of a leading question because we don't really have that many aggression cards for heroes yet. So given the other options, I'd probably lean cunning, just because I think some of the events in cunning can kind of help with some. I mean, I'm thinking mainly of Asteroid Sanctuary because A, that's a card I just think is very good, and B, it kind of fits with this model of playing a lot of lower cost stuff. I mean, that card gives your 3 costs or less a shield, so that feels good. And there will be some other things that I think will work with that as well. I will be kind of waiting to see though, because I think we'll probably end up in it with a deck like this, getting to 2 greens, because I think you're going to want command with Leia. I really do.
Wow. Okay. Well, remains to be seen for sure. But I think right now with the card pool, I think you're right. I mean, cunning is what we have the most of for. Well, actually, probably vigilance is what we have the most of for heroism. But I think cunning does give you access to the unit Leia, which is incredible. That's one of the 2 cunning rebels that exists, along with rogue operative. Excuse me.
Leia is one of my favorite heroism cards. She is extremely powerful for 2 resources.
I think it's probably one of the best cards we've seen so far, and it's crazy to say that about a 2-cost card. So
yes.
So I think you're going to want that for now until something proves to you that you don't. Where cunning succeeds with a go wide strategy is, if you have a lot of smaller units that you have on the field and you're trying to contend with bigger units, things like surprise strike, things like shoot first, things like waylay are all going to help you maintain arena dominance. I do think that based on what heroism is sort of leaning towards, there's an argument to be made for vigilance, or at least there will be an argument to be made for vigilance, because the sentinel aspect is something that's really going to be powerful, especially if you have a lot of small units and you can't necessarily defend your base as well as maybe some bigger units would. So that dynamic with those two aspects, it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And then of course Leia has the access to prepare for takeoff and resupply, as we see here. So really cool to see Leia finally getting some discussion in the Star Wars Unlimited universe, because she sort of got released and was put on the shelf because we didn't have a ton in Heroism Command, and now we even just the inclusion of these 3 and 4 cards seems fun.
Yeah, I mean, they could be difference makers for sure. So, and that's the beauty of all of this, is as more cards are spoiled, we revisit what we've seen in the past and how much those cards potentially got better or worse. And yeah, I mean, Leia with Dodonna in the deck and being able to buff Rebels as well. I mean, we heard it, right? We heard it from Danny during the gameplay stream. Like that's a deck. Leia Rebels is a deck, with Dodonna in the mix. So we'll be very curious to see where that one lands.
Agreed. Yeah, this is one that can only go up from here. But I think that right now Cunning's in a good place, and I think Vigilance is not far behind. So let's talk about Tarkin. Let's talk about what is potentially the best new leader on the block here. Remains to be seen how it shakes out, but what villainy units are available to Tarkin? Well, we've seen a little bit more in terms of villainy units. So there's 20 villainy units that are available. None right now in Cunning are Imperials, right? So we've got some Cunning units, but they're not Imperials. They're Underworld or Fringe, or whatever the case may be. So you've got only 1 Vigilance. That, of course, is Lieutenant Childson, and he's a ground unit. 6 Command Imperial units, 4 in the ground, 2 in space. 5 Aggression Imperial units, 4 in the ground and 1 in space. And then 8, just like with Leia and Heroism, there are 8 units that we have so far that are only villainy aspect that are Imperials. And then Tarkin does have access, in addition to Command and Prepare for Takeoff and Resupply, has access to Overwhelming Barrage, which is one of my favorite cards that we've seen, and probably one of the strongest cards in the game we have right now. So all that being said, if you're Tarkin, you're going to be including Super Laser Technicians. You're probably going to be including some resupplies. You're going to be including Overwhelming Barrage. You're going to be attempting to build your units and make them bigger. If that is the case, where do you see Command and Villainy fitting in with the third aspect?
Yeah, so I think for something like Tarkin, when you're kind of just building a tower of a unit and trying to impose your will with it, I think I'm probably less concerned about the specific aspect that you're going for and more concerned about certain abilities or types of cards that you want to use to leverage that advantage. So the 2 things that come to mind for me are, A, you just talked about this in the Leia discussion, but I think Sentinels become even more important with a character like Tarkin, because if you're trying to build up something big and beefy, then it's going to help to have to be able to have units that draw the firepower away from that. Or theoretically, I guess you could also build up your Sentinel, which could be pretty powerful. But either way, I think Sentinels make potentially an even bigger impact in a deck like this, where you're trying to protect a really massive unit. And then the second point would be to your, fitting in with the Overwhelming Barrage discussion, cards that allow you to do damage without taking any back. Because if you're giving all these experience tokens to units, and then you're attacking with them, that's great. They've got really high damage values, and they've got a little bit more HP because of the experience tokens, but they're still taking damage back. Where you can really kind of push the advantage even more, I think, are with cards like Overwhelming Barrage, like Shoot First if you're in yellow, to be able to just really take advantage of the fact that you've beefed up these units. They're heavier on their attack values, and now they can do that bigger damage to something without having to take a hit back. So those are the 2 things I would probably look for if I was building around Tarkin right now.
So it's an interesting point you make, because Sentinels do seem really strong with Tarkin and sort of keeping the attention away from beefing up your other units. That would probably, to me, suggest Vigilance, at least right now. You do have the Gladiator Star Destroyer that gives a unit Sentinel temporarily, and that's another command card that you already have access to. So again, you're continuing with that sentinelizing of your team. Sentinelizing, not a word, but we'll go with it for now.
It works.
I do think right now that and it helps that there's a lot of cards to be able to use it with, so it may be sort of cheating in a way. But I do think that aggression stands out to me for the second point that you mentioned, for being able to deal damage without taking it back. I think when open fire was revealed by our friends over at the Golden Dice podcast, I think I was a little hesitant on its power level, but now that I've had a chance to see some of these other cards that are coming out and see how valuable 4 damage is, I think open fire is a really strong card, at least until we get something better. And being able to open fire and remove a threat from the board, provided you have initiative and provided you have the ability to do so before they attack, and either whittle down or get rid of the unit that you're trying to build up, I think is really strong. I think if I were to build a Tarkin deck right now out of the cards that we have, I think aggression would be my first foray into it, because you would have access to cards like that are able to deal direct damage and remove things before they become a problem for you. Because again, at the end of the day, if you're trying to go tall, as they kept saying in the stream, you need stuff to stick around, and you need to be able to wait until you can afford the big stuff. Because right now, a lot of the big stuff is in villainy. You have the ATSCs, you have the Blizzard Adepts, you have the Relentlesses, you have the Palpatines. Those are massive, and it's going to take you a while to get to those. So in the meantime, you need to be able to play these other cards that are not like, the 9 out of 20 units that cost 4 or more in the Imperial faction. That's almost half of your cards that are costing 4 and above. That's a lot. That's a big commitment for your resources, especially if you're not drawing your resupplies and your super laser technicians. So I think giving yourself the ability to pay 2 for a force choke, to pay 3 for an open fire, to pay 4 for an Imperial interceptor and remove, an X-wing or a wing leader, or, if somebody's already, deleted one of your units with an Ozatuk, you can finish it off with that interceptor or that open fire. I think that is going to provide, at least for now, a way for Tarkin to be able to hold out, and make sure that he can not just build up his units, but also get a couple attacks in. That 4 damage can be the difference in Tarkin staying around for 2 turns and versus 3 turns. So
well, and you want that because you want to get that free experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you need him to be able to do those 2 attacks or even 3. Super important to his returning value for you.
Agreed. So yeah,
I just wish open fire cost 2, Kevin. That's my problem with that card. It's like just a flat 4 damage. I mean,
I think it would I think it would be a little too above curve if it costs 2, because
it would.
Because surprise strike costs 2 and that gives you a +3.
Yeah.
So it
tricky. Just doesn't feel good for 3. It doesn't feel as good for 3, I have to say.
It feels good when you can pay 3 to get rid of Dodonna. I'll tell you that much.
Yes, that is true.
It feels good. It feels good when you can pay 3 to put 4 damage on Luke and then have him go into your cell block guard and trade that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't claim to understand trading like some people do, but I do know that getting rid of Luke as soon as he comes out is probably a pretty good thing. So there's that. Yeah. But look, this is going to be an ongoing debate, as to how Imperial units function the best, how Rebel units function the best. I do think that Rebels and Imperials are going to be the 2 dominant tribes within Spark of Rebellion. I think depending on how deep the second set goes into other tribal mechanics, we could see some complementary cards in the second set that continue to boost an already strong tribal mechanic from Spark of Rebellion. So we're going to revisit Rebels and Imperials a lot as we get closer and closer to the game being released, and then eventually when the game does release, we'll continue to talk about what Imperials and Rebels have at their disposal. But a really interesting sort of way to look at, okay, what are the Rebels trying to do? What are the Imperials trying to do? How do they end up doing that? I think is sort of what we're trying to go for here. And, hopefully you folks agree.
Yeah, I think it definitely is You can see the juxtaposition between the two approaches here, and it's laid out pretty clearly in terms of the way the card pool kind of stacks up for both sides. So again, something to keep an eye on for sure, because these cards will continue to incur options as we get more and more of the set, and so then we'll see how any of this kind of analysis changes. But for now, it seems like we've got some pretty solid options already for both, and there's a lean at least as to what aspect might fit best with what the leader provides.
Yeah. So, take a look, see if you like one build or another, and let us know in the comments below where you land on what aspects to pair with Leia and Tarkin. Let's see, let's see what you're feeling in terms of, now that we have more command cards and we're going to be getting more command cards throughout the month. Let's see how this shakes out in a month or in 2 months, and see if your comments and our thoughts hold true. But we can't let you go just yet, Corwin, and I know you've got very important things to do in your life, but we can't let you go just quite yet without talking about a couple of cards that we saw before Command Month even started, and we hinted a little bit at it earlier in the stream. We've got to talk about Boba Fett. In Kanto they don't talk about Bruno. Here we do talk about Boba. So let's get into it real quick before we run out of time here. So we saw a legendary Boba Fett revealed by the folks over at Hobbies and Happiness. Go check them out. There'll be a link to their reveals in the description box below. But this Boba Fett is a legendary unit, and boy, does it seem legendary. It's a ground unit, 3 cost. You get a cunning and villainy unit that is an underworld bounty hunter with those are the traits. 3 attack, 5 HP. And on attack, if this unit is attacking an exhausted unit that did not enter play this round, you deal 3 damage to the defender. So this basically turns into a 6/5 with the potential to remove any units that that have 3 or less remaining HP without taking any damage back in return. Seems pretty awesome and fitting of the Disintegrator subtitle.
Yes, the Disintegrator. This is a really, really strong card. I think the ability is a little bit specific and will be kind of tricky to sequence, at least until you kind of get more comfortable using the card. But I definitely feel like if it does go off the way that it's intended to, very, very powerful ability. So really, really like this Boba Fett a lot. And getting a 3/5 for 3 is actually really, really solid. He's got a little bit of beefiness to him with that 5 health, and definitely will be a priority, I think, for the other side to kind of take down as soon as possible. Because if he's allowed to run away with things and disintegrate at will, he's going to cause some major problems.
My only complaint about this card is that it can't automatically remove those pesky Fleet Lieutenants. Right? Fleet Lieutenant hits the board and buffs something. The ability doesn't proc on the Fleet Lieutenant that just hit the board. You have to wait until it exhausts again, which I think is part of the balance in the design of this card, to make it so that you're not just automatically deleting everything, for 3 resources. The Fleet Lieutenants, man, the bane of my existence. But anyway, I think this is strong, and I think there's no argument there that it's going to be a really good card. And again, at Legendary, that's probably what you're expecting. You're probably expecting a really good card, and you've got one here, and the art looks tremendous. And I don't necessarily think there's much more to be said about that, because you've got something that is widely accepted to be really, really cool. But what I think is cooler, and maybe I'm wrong here, I know you think I'm wrong, but maybe I'm wrong here, is Fett's Firespray, which was also revealed by Hobbies and Happiness. So they got some double trouble going there. This is not a legendary, this is a rare. And it's a space unit that costs 6. For 6, you're getting a double aspect again, which is cunning and villainy. You're getting a 5/6 underworld vehicle transport. And this is where the cool part comes in, because when played, if you control Boba Fett or Jango Fett as a leader or unit, ready this unit. So not quite ambush. It has the flexibility to attack both a base and a unit right away, which is awesome. And it has an action where you pay 2 resources and you can exhaust a non-unique unit. You don't have to exhaust Fett's Firespray to do that. You just have to pay the 2 resources. So you've got Leia on a stick here. You've got Asteroid Sanctuary on a stick here. I think this has a lot of potential. Where do you land on this?
Not as highly as you, Kevin.
Shocking.
I think it's a fine card. I think that, obviously you're gonna be running this probably exclusively in a Boba or Django deck. I don't think it fits outside of that because you really want that one plate effect. But yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's definitely something that is an auto include with Boba or Django. The two resources you're paying for the exhaust, a non-unique unit, is just not as strong as what you get with Leia or Asteroid Sanctuary. And so that kind of dampens its power level a bit for me. The 5/6 is fine. Yeah, I just think it comes in, middle of the pack. Not a bad card by any means. Definitely going to be a little bit more powerful with Boba and Django, and otherwise, just pretty straightforward. Then the ready on play is nice and is something that I think gets it to where it's playable, maybe a little bit above playable, but otherwise for me it's very very much middle of the pack, as I said.
Above playable. Wow, harsh, man. So are you telling me that if this action ability was to just exhaust an enemy unit, you'd be much more high on it?
Yeah, because I mean, the non-unique does restrict it, so you can pay 2 to do that, or you can pay 2 to exhaust the unit and get a shield, or you can pay 2 to get a 2/2 body plus exhaust the unit. So it's just not quite living up to the same thing. The trade-off is that you're getting these other effects, but you're also paying 6 for that. So you're going to pay 6 for the card plus 2 for the ability. It's starting to get a little expensive for me.
So you pay 6 the first time you use this, and you get 5 damage, and then the next round you get the to use the action potentially, and you get 5 more damage. So I see your point about the Asteroid Sanctuary giving you a shield and Leia giving you a 2/2 unit. But if this is out for even a round, you could be getting 10 damage and exhausting a unit for the cost of, yes, 8 resources, but the exhaust part of it that comes with it is, only 2. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting to how cool I think this card is. Obviously the homage to Django there is really cool. But in a world where you can park this in space, and if they're not paying attention to space, you can just be swinging for 5 and exhausting units every round. That doesn't suck, especially if your opponent has a nice beefy Blizzard AT-AT to exhaust, right? So
Oh yeah, obviously the value skyrockets if you're able to exhaust. Yeah, something higher cost like that. There's no question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just think there are better options for 6, and this is going to fall like in a very specific type of deck build. And so, as long as that's kind of limiting it, I see it as being a little bit less attractive than some of these other cards we've seen.
Are there better options for 6 in villainy? I don't know that I think that's true. I don't know that this is better than ATST. Are there other 6-cost units? The Gladiator Star Destroyers.
Let me
6
see
cost.
here.
So it's the Gladiator
Gladiator
and the ATST. Those are the only 2 right now. And I think this is probably better than both of them. In heroism, I agree with you completely, right? Because obviously Obi-Wan is 6. And I think that's really all the argument you need, because Obi-Wan's one of the best.
It's not even lighting the candle to Obi-Wan. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's on par. I think ATS. I think they're very comparable.
Yeah.
ATST and this card are very comparable, and then Gladiator. Trying to pull that one up to see. That one is. I mean, I like the Sentinel. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I like the Sentinel ability that Gladiator gives you, so I probably would give that one the edge over this card.
I mean, I would say arguably exhausting a unit every round is better than the Sentinel for 1 round. But anyway, the point is, it's got some potential. I think that I think it's better than ATST. We'll see in practice, right? I mean, again, there's still I don't know, almost 200 cards to be spoiled, maybe a little less, which is really exciting, because who knows where these cards fall out, and whether or not Fett's Firespray ends up being something that you want to include in more than just a Boba Fett leader deck. Probably not, but in a Boba Fett deck, pretty spicy. So, I think that there's plenty of incentive right now to play Boba Fett. Just like there's plenty of incentive to play Tarkin and Leia. Just like there's plenty of incentive to play Luke and Vader. And then, I think Chewie and Krennic will get there, right? But yeah, I there's a lot of excitement to come, which I think is all the more reason to keep watching these streams and watching social media, because you never know what we're gonna get. I can guarantee you by the time this episode comes out, there'll be another card that we weren't able to talk about. So it just, the hits keep coming, and I love that. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, and we can continue to debate these cards, and honestly, the conversations are going to keep changing, because it's one thing to just take a look at these cards in a vacuum without any context, but then as you start to add more to the card pool and see how all of these different cards are working together, it makes for a different conversation. So I say all that to say I reserve the right to change my opinions if it comes down to it later.
Well, the cards will be what change our opinions, and I think that's the beauty of it, is the sense that
yes,
when we find out more, we'll know more, and then we'll be able to react accordingly. But in the meantime, really hope you guys enjoyed this discussion about the command aspect, about tribal mechanics, and what could go better with some of these Rebel and Imperial leaders and cards that we've seen so far. Thank you for making it this far. If you have, again, we really appreciate all the support that we've been having on the channel recently. It's been awesome, and hopefully we've been able to deliver some of the stuff that you guys might be looking for in your coverage of Star Wars Unlimited. If not, if there's some feedback that you have for us, please let us know in the comments below. But in the meantime, again, we're doing this as a way to connect and engage with the community, and to talk about a game that we're both very excited about, even though Corwin's at an 8 and I'm at a 10, and just can't wait for 2024. So we're going to keep doing that, and we appreciate all the support along the way. So thank you guys. Corwin, any final thoughts before we wrap up for the evening?
I think it was definitely a commanding discussion that we just had, and I'm very excited to get to aggression, though, because I think that there's going to be some spicy stuff in there too. And as these different aspects start to really show us their identities and take shape, it's going to really add to the hype and the excitement. So looking forward to that.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, because before we get to the aggression aspect stream, there are a couple more streams on tap for this month, including the next stream, which I believe is about the contents of booster packs, which I am absolutely geeked over. I cannot wait to hear about the rarities, to hear about pack distribution, hopefully to get some idea of what's in a box. Like, that to me is super exciting. I can't wait to see that. And then I think the following week, or maybe the week after that, they're having a stream about the product line and what products we're going to see for this game. And that's not just the 2-player starter, like what we're going to see out of boxes. Are there any other supplemental products that are going to have cards in them? We know about the Game Genic stuff. Is there anything additional there? So that's super cool, and I can't wait for those streams. So make sure to tune in to Roll On Gaming for continuing coverage of all of that. But for now, we've taken up a lot of your time, and we really appreciate those of you who have made it this far. So we're going to sign off and let you get back to the rest of your day. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening, and thanks so much for having us be a part of your Star Wars Unlimited coverage. For my brother Corwin, I'm Kevin, signing off.